Our next session is called Of Expectations and Reality. We have two people presenting, Ujjwala and Lakshita. So Ujjwala, if you could start presenting.
Sure. I hope my screen's visible. Okay. Primrose Hills, White Meadows, Woodland Park, or even Royal Gardens. These names are as ubiquitous as being aspirational as one may imagine. And our cities are dotted with housing projects like this. And as exotic and fanciful as they sound, they seem to be quite interchangeable. They might as well be Primrose Meadows or Misty Heights or even Royal Park. They all seem like or sound like real projects. To analyze these names, one could club maybe all the ones associated with greenery together, or the ones which have a relationship with water, or even the projects that hint sort of at grandeur and prestige. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ujjwala, and I will be discussing something that seems quite like an oxymoron, the expectations of aspirations. Our homes are a collection of curious things: words, values, greed, ideals, desires, aspirations, choices, and all of them forming and being part of our larger worldview. Our worldview is the fundamental and existential cognitive orientation of us as an individual. And through it, we embody our dreams, hopes, values, emotions, and even ethics. And our homes are a reflection of who we are. They manifest what we believe in, as they are the one space we define. And in turn, it defines us as well. An interesting exercise was to ask residents of a housing society in Bangalore, the one that I stay in, to mark their preferences according to the names of projects, imagining that all the information that they have about each project is just the name. Also, please don't mind the fonts of the names of the projects. They are sort of to prove a point. To analyze the information in a particular manner, it was interesting to see how some people marked projects that had names relating to greenery higher, while some marked projects that had names associated with grandeur and prestige higher than others, or settled for more ambiguous names as middle preferences. Some people had specific preferences relating to names like Exotica or Windmills of My Mind, marking them as their last choices. Many even asked me, what is the point of this particular exercise? The names people choose, higher or lower, presents a fascinating insight into their minds. Why does someone choose Greenwoods higher than Lakeside Habitat? Or that three people chose the name of the flat that they stay in, that is Aquila Heights, as one of their last three choices. All of these preferences tend to paint a picture of the person and the views they hold. They hint at people's lives, narratives that are complex and difficult to simplistically imagine, which are layers of personality. As I take interviews within these homes, I'm always invited to sit in the living room. The place where I am to sit always specified subtly with either a motion of the hand or where we would stop within a space. Sometimes I sat on the sofa next to the door opposite to the people I interview, while other times I sat next to people, always hinting at how comfortable they might be in engaging in conversation. At 22D, Lekha auntie tells me of a simple outlook towards life, casually mentioning her dislike towards nameplates hanging outside her front door. She believed that being referred to as 22D is a good enough approach for her and her husband. Yet, their door has been changed from plain wood to an embellished and carved piece. Motioning towards the lack of curtains covering the large floor-length windows of her home, she mentions her love for nature and light and greenery. She wishes she could have had a larger balcony to grow her plants. I sit on a wooden sofa that is almost 100 years old, and she proudly mentions how this type of solid rosewood furniture is no longer made. She's a person acutely aware of her aspirations and manifestations within her home. At 23C, Mr. Shekhar sat at his dining table, constantly worrying whether he should or should not wear a mask while talking to me. After a few fitful and fidgety minutes, he finally got up and put on a mask. This belied a sense of wanting to follow rules, becoming more and more apparent as our conversation continued. He's part of the society committee. He's a man of rules, of ethics, a problem solver. He's astute, keen, critical, discerning. He likes his home to be a reflection of who he is, explaining in great detail every element, though aptly critical of how it is manifested, be it the weirdly placed gully trap that he discovered, or the windows that give a wonderful view, but he says that cannot be cleaned. In 9D, Mona tells me about her new sofa and asks me for decoration tips. She talks about her home in Mumbai and her shift to Bangalore, of being scared to go to Chickpet market to buy some decorative elements for her home, leaving her twin children behind. Her twins lounge on the new bright blue sofa, which has been custom made, play badminton in the living room, sing loudly to Moana's songs, while she discusses her kitchen remodeling with me. I sit on the grey sofa she dislikes and plans on selling, as she thinks her entire home was becoming too monochromatic. She's excited also about her plans for buying a set of floral lounge chairs, but is worried about the curtains that would match with it. At 5C, Mrs. Gupta puts on some music before sitting down to answer my mundane questions. She speaks of her home in a manner that is reflective of her thoughts, freely using adjectives for both herself and her home. A retired journalist, she has a way with words, engaging in conversation with energy and enthusiasm. She is critical of her home, though in a way that is not too negative. She tells me about the names of the projects by a developer in Bangalore. Windmills of Your Mind, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. They were all named after classic songs, and she seems thrilled to tell me this little tidbit of information. In 9A, Vidhi tells me about her husband working from home. She casually mentions how she does not believe in Vastu, but does take care to sleep with her feet facing away from the direction of the rising sun. Her son has just learned to read and practices on a Google Read Along app on her phone while we speak. She is a mother, constantly aware of her child and his movements, keen to engage with him. As I leave, I hear her telling him how she would like to play a game with him. Her tone at times is reserved and at times incredibly open, as she tells me about all the houses she has moved to and the cities she has lived in. The people who live in these homes are acutely aware of their status as users. They are clear about their concerns, their aspirations, and their imaginations of a better home. Though they do recognize what they have and are sort of content, it is a constant flux of what could be and what is. They live in this sense of acceptance of their homes. They try to change it, sometimes even choosing to not change, to match their homes with their demands and their values. Their homes are a puzzle, a complex layering of themselves. The way they follow rules or they might not, the way they think of glass windows, the way they imagine problems and fixing them, it all gives way to their personalities, a deep reflection of who they are. One of the first discussions within these interviews was to ask, why did they choose to buy or rent a house in this particular society? It helped me paint a picture of their backgrounds, their jobs, the family dynamics, their needs, and their aspirations. Lekha aunty told me how she thought Tata was a good brand, and it was a society with a lot of amenities, and it had space for a lot of physical activities. Mr. Shekhar told me once again about Tata being a good brand, how it was a 3 BHK, so he liked it, and it was close to his workplace where he used to work earlier. Mona told me how it was close to schools, and the house appeared very clean when she first visited it. Mrs. Gupta told me that the layout was nice once again, and they liked the open kitchen, and they were very close to the airport because they traveled a lot to visit their children living abroad. Vidhi told me how they liked the security and the gated complex, and it was away from the concrete jungle, as well as situated in a greener area. We imagine homes to be a direct reflection of us, but they're so much more complex and sometimes inscrutable. As architects, we design for a uniform mass of people. We imagine their lives to be simplistic, all comfortably fitting into the boxes we so easily make. And yet, the inhabitants of these homes lead their individual lives, making and remaking the space we imagined for them. As I ask them questions varying from electrical sockets to Vastu, I try to imagine their lives and their worldviews through quick plans I also make during the interviews. Once again, going back to Sulekha aunty, she's a Tamilian Brahmin, and she was adamant about how the electrical sockets in the kitchen were completely all right, and she faced no problems with the location or the number of sockets. She's a biochemistry professor for BSc, and she sat on her dining table and graded papers. It's interesting how her dining table was pushed to the side wall to accommodate a large prayer area next to the living room. Usually, the sliding aluminum frame doors to the balcony are kept open, though she does mention how the breeze reduces the efficiency of her gas stove, something that she realized. So Lekha Aunty is also aware of the pigeon poop problem in the service shafts, yet is highly appreciative of the light each bathroom gets because of these same shafts. Her parking spot is a bit far from the lift lobby, though they have a small trolley to help them carry the groceries easily. She knows the number of appliances in her home and makes it a point to walk up and count everything once again, just to be sure. Mr. Shekhar, who is a retired engineer now well into his late 60s, lives an exciting life as part of the society committee. He goes into great detail to explain building regulations and the window cleaning problem that the architects overlooked. While I asked about the balcony size, he switches his diatribe to mention the diesel generator and waxes long about the sewage treatment plant and its capacity. He seems fascinated by the building, going deep into discerning every problem at its core. He's very firm in adhering to regulations as well, dismissive of people who keep their front doors open when the house, he feels, should be a private space. As Mona's twins play in the living room, he explains that with two children, he often runs out of space to dry clothes and has to resort to drying them in all the other balconies. She counts the number of appliances in her kitchen, though does recount them after remembering the utility space that she forgot. She also wishes for a kitchen garden. Moreover, she proudly points out towards the storage cabinet she and her husband designed, while moving on to tell me of her love for her balcony, where she spends almost 2 to 3 hours every day. Mrs. Gupta experiences vertigo and thus chose to live on a lower floor, that is the fifth floor. They are also aware of their age and their ability to climb stairs in case of an emergency. She lights lamps in the living room to create a warm, inviting, and cozy atmosphere and tries to alleviate the awkwardness in our conversation. She throws in tidbits of information like how she knows an architect in Pune that I should definitely check out their wonderful work, while also mentioning her laziness in cleaning up the rough surface of the balcony sill, which she feels could have been a smoother surface. Vidhi's front door usually greets visitors with her son's new artwork, hung up proudly for everyone to see. Her living room is currently decorated with her son's fifth birthday celebrations, and while he sits next to her and reads, she tells me about her father being an architect as well. She says that since their two parking spots in the basement are a bit far away from the lift, it does become difficult sometimes to carry their son if he falls asleep. All of these stories depict intricate lives of people, giving us tidbits to form links and connections, to understand their worldviews, to build their narratives. We come to no conclusion other than to just put ourselves in their shoes for a tiny moment, to imagine their values and aspirations, their expectations, and to present the intricacies of their lives. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ujjwala. Lakshita, if you could present now.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lakshita, and I'll be presenting a small video that I've prepared. It tries to interpret the relationship between the words aspirations, status, and luxury, and has been constructed using different interviews I took with residents in my society and some brokers around the city.
Creating designs across India in a uniquely Unitech way.
कुछ शब्द बोलूँगी और जो आप उसके बारे में सोचते हैं बस मुझे बता दीजिए। Easy, effortless.
Carpentry stuff is organized in a manner that I can locate my things really well, conveniently. They are well organized.
और मॉडलर में आ जाते हैं जो भी पूरी पूरी तरीके से जो फुल्ली वो हो जाता है फुल्ली ऑटोमेटिक
अरेंज अच्छा हो जाता है तो नील रहता है.
Things come out with the press of the button or something.
This is the doors. Wow. This is called actual luxury.
A gym, swimming pool.
Air conditioned centrally, just closer to nature.
जैसे कि अपना मार्बल इटालियन हो गया अपना वुडन फ्लोरिंग हो गया फ्लोर सीलिंग हो गया
सारा म्यूजिकल गार्डन है.
क्लब है अच्छा स्विमिंग पूल है अच्छा जिम है.
It's a place where you can park your cars before you enter, and then you're taken in by a battery operated cars or something, so you keep it environmentally friendly.
The small golf putting greens and all that has been created in the complex for the golf lovers.
So finally, on the second floor, we have an operational 32-seater private miniplex, which is
Oh, that's fantastic. I think every apartment should be parked this.
अरावली फेसिंग आ गई पूल फेसिंग है पार्क फेसिंग है क्लब फेसिंग है सन व्यू हो गया.
View has been a very good term to attract like-minded people.
View of an apartment really matters. It's a nice view when you step out, like wow. Instead of just seeing, dug up places or even concrete, I think it's just a happy feel.
क्या बात है, क्या बात है. एक तो ये ह्यूज 50 फीट की बालकनी और उसको इतना ब्यूटीफुली ऐसे जैसे लग रहा है कि अपना प्राइवेट गार्डन ही है.
In India, how much you have to pay for it? I think there's a lot of thing attached to the image. So
Added expenditure.
सबसे मेन पॉइंट तो गुलफोस रोड ये दूसरा गुड़गांव के टच मेट्रो के नजदीक प्रीमियम इसलिए बोलते हैं प्रीमियम लोकेशन होती है.
Premium societies relate to the kind of customers you attract in the property. Premium customers means those who can afford to opt for a higher value property.
Height of this thing, ceiling should be higher.
3 लेवल की कार पार्किंग है. कार अंदर नहीं आएगी. बच्चे अगर खेल रहे हैं तो वो बहुत सेफ है और आपको टेंशन लेने की बिल्कुल
Yes, it definitely matters. I would say.
I would still not go for it. So I think it depends on who you interact with, who do you move around with, and then that becomes.
Makes a linear line between the upper middle class and the other classes.
Prestigious addresses in India doesn't. I don't think it works.
Something that is perfect for lifestyle.
Always think the best house would be the one which actually has bricks exposed, actually has brass and a central courtyard.
Typically design is a very term which has been used for the taste of a individual.
ये सारी लैंड डीएलएफ की है, वो पीछे आप देखोगे वो भी डीएलएफ है, वो पीछे भी डीएलएफ है। 55 मिलियन स्क्वायर फीट, 55 मिलियन स्क्वायर फीट अभी और कमिटमेंट है।
DLF is not a builder, they are a cult, they are a cult, they are a cult.
Yes, that's it. No, thank you.
Oh, that was really interesting. I really like the emphasis at the end when the person was talking about DLF. But yes, I think both the presentations are talking about aspirations, but uh, of varied kinds. One is, I think, Ujjwala, when you were interviewing a lot of people, they were touching on very specific things, and interestingly, different people were touching on different or talking about different things when it came to what they look for. And I think in the case of Lakshita's presentation about Gurgaon, the whole sort of focus on amenities and view and all the facilities that you have with housing. But so my question to both of you, what do you think? So how do you view this aspirational part? That this is what people aspire for, and what do you see your role as architects in how you should engage with that aspiration? Should you modify, try to mold it, or should you cater to it? What are your views on it?
Well, I think when I was making the presentation and asking these words to people, it was extremely. I mean, I don't know the answer to this question at all, because I mean, the kind of responses that I got and what you saw, the kind of aspirations, for example, that luxurious hall, TV hall, theater that people want, and water garden and stuff like that. I mean, the thing is that even my society has like a gymnasium, and I think they have a jacuzzi or something also, and then none of them, nobody uses those things. I mean, as far as my society is concerned, nobody's using half the amenities that they buy it for. And then I'm not sure, because the thing is that to a huge extent, I think those, and why I called it status is because to a huge extent, people homes are not just seen as a shelter anymore. I think, and it's also become a commodity where people want to showcase how much they earn or whatever, and how much does their house actually present themselves in terms of their financial situation. So yeah, I don't know how to interpret it, because or what can be my take as a designer and how I take that forward. Or I'm not at all sure about that actually.
I think I completely agree with Lakshita, because aspirations, as you said, can be molded. So how, I mean, and they're molded by so many different factors. And sometimes I think what happens is we imagine users or the people living in these homes or the spaces that we design to be sort of unidimensional and have just a single layer, to think that they have a single layer of aspirations. But those aspirations are also not just aspirations, they are their entire worldview, and it is informed by everything that they go through within their lives. It may be something, I mean, some, most people, for example, only one of the people that I interviewed understood that a gully trap was weirdly placed, and because he was an engineer, and he was part of the committee, society committee, and he looked at everything a little bit more critically. while other people spoke more about their love for nature and how they wish that the balcony could be bigger. Somebody questioned me, asking me that I want to understand, is there some sort of ratio that is available for balcony size to living room size? Because I want to know if this building has followed it. So these are all informed by things that people, their entire lives sort of culminate somewhere in their houses. And the way they perceive their houses, it is not a single layer of perception at all. It is, and I think that is what makes it so complex to ever answer the question that how do you fit in. And I think, like we were talking about this in the previous discussion as well, do we then design a dabba, just an envelope for people to do whatever they want in it, or do we question larger things, or do we question very tiny things? Where do we intervene? Where do we put ourselves? And I think that is sort of the quest that we're all on, but it is unimaginable to answer it coherently.
Yeah, I think especially when going back to what Lakshita was talking about of these amenities, uh, the swimming pool and the gym, and like you're saying, in many, at least in many housing societies, these are heavily underutilized. No one, I mean, uh, uh, no one uses the gym, no one uses the swimming pool, and but yet it is like a USP for the project, right? I quite like the way that person was proudly presenting uh, all the amenities. Uh, it's I mean, there seems to be no end to what all you can provide possibly, and so but coming back to this question, because to me when it comes to these talking about aspirations of people, yes, on one hand we know that aspirations can be uh, 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 manufactured or can be seeded into people, like inception. I mean, through the way you portray the project, through the way you advertise it, the names that you are talking of, for example. I find that a very fascinating study. I mean, I was doing that for Ahmedabad, where even in Ahmedabad there has been this trend on one hand of naming housing projects based on such English sounding international names, from so there is Palm Beach housing, and there is some meadows, and there is Green Park, and uh, things that you would never associate with Ahmedabad as a place. Uh, what I found even more fascinating is of late this trend where projects have uh, two-worded names, but one of them is Indian and one of them is foreign. So it will be like Ganesh Meadows, or and it's very fascinating, because I think how you name the project, you are sort of targeting a certain audience by naming your project in a certain way. And I and unlike Bangalore, I think Bangalore is much more cosmopolitan than Ahmedabad. So I see in these double names of housing projects in Ahmedabad a very strange sort of attempt to accommodate the aspirational, which is the foreign sounding name, and yet give a local, append it with some sort of a local name. Uh, and yeah, so I think the the advertising of housing, or how it is sold, on what basis it is sold, has a huge impact then on what kind of aspirations that people end up wanting when it comes to housing. And uh, yeah, okay, maybe we can open it up to questions or comments from the audience?
I'm
Okay.
not sure if this makes sense, but like a lot of these aspirations are functional and like certain amenities or something like that. And if you take that aspect of it away, is it just about the sort of looks of it then? Like, are there any aspirations which are sort of left in between, which are actually architectural? Or do they just fall into either of these two categories? Either it's a function based aspiration, like a swimming pool or a clubhouse, or is it that the building has to look modern, it has to look rich, or something like that? I don't know.
I also just had a small point that adds to Ashami's point on amenities. Can you all hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can't hear you after you asked, can you hear me? I think he just wanted to be heard. But till we wait for
I can hear.
okay, but we are not able to hear you. Yeah, hello. So we didn't hear what you said, so if you could repeat it.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically when it comes to the amenities, I mean, most buildings have like the scale of the
Yeah, Siddharth, maybe you could type your question out and we'll read it. Maybe I think your connection is a bit weak. Yeah. So while Siddharth is typing out his question, I just also wanted to take this question of amenities into a discussion of urbanity or cities, because um I also think that in some ways it seems to work well for municipal corporations as well, if amenities start becoming part of housing projects, because in a way then it is an abdication of responsibility from the part of the city to provide certain amenities to people, whether it is related to health in terms of jogging tracks or gyms or swimming pool, or sometimes it could also be entertainment like clubhouses and theaters. It could also be convenience stores and shops. Um, but also what it does is, because the kind of amenities that are provided vary widely based on the whether the project is uh, for rich people or poor people. What is also happening is that increasingly you are privatizing the amenities of a city and putting them inside compound walls rather than them being outside compound walls and therefore being accessible to many more people in the city. And I think cities are more than happy abdicating that responsibility. If all housing projects had their own gardens and parks and swimming pools, then there will be no question asked of the city as to where is the park provided by the city. And I think it is from that perspective one should also start questioning how much and what kind of amenities do we want within that gated community of housing. What is the scale at which we are providing the amenity? If I take a swimming pool for example, I think a lot of modern high-end apartments have swimming pools, but even for largest sort of apartment complex, which might have say 300 houses or 400 houses, a swimming pool is never efficient, in the sense you'd find maybe on weekends you'd find 10, 12 people in that swimming pool, whereas the rest of the day it is primarily empty. So at what scale are we providing those resources is also, I think, an important question. Uh, okay. So I think there are a couple of points or questions in the chat. One is about whether we as designers can engage and expand the imagination of aspiration. And on the other hand, uh, uh, the point that it's basic human tendency to progress, and I feel it's natural. That earlier we had multi-purpose halls as basic amenities, and now it is progressed to swimming pools and uh, uh, gyms as amenities. So how would you look? How would you look at this question of basic human tendency to want these amenities in your housing society? I can afford it, so why not have it?
I mean, it's almost like a minimum bar that you set for a project, especially advertising it to a certain economic class. So, I mean, if if you don't have these amenities, your units are never going to be sold, or the units are going to stay unoccupied, or people are not going. And it doesn't matter how much they're going to be used, exactly as you were saying. You might have an indoor pool, you might have a sauna room, a tennis court, and whatnot. But I think it stems from the aspiration is now to have a bare minimum, and that if that bare minimum is not fulfilled, then you feel like you've been cheated of something. So it's almost like I mean, and I wouldn't per se agree that it's basic human tendency to make, I mean, it is basic human tendency to make progress, but what was considered a basic amenity is now a luxury. I think that's, I mean, if you just look at it in history, it doesn't conform to that. There have been cycles of like having certain having swimming pools as a certain commodity, or it changes, but so it doesn't become basic commodities, but it does somewhere become basic, is what I'm saying. I mean, it does fall into the idea of the bare minimum that you need. It might change because of a lot of other factors that happen in the next 30 years, but I sort of have no idea how to I really cannot answer the question on how do we ever do things for it. I mean, how do we as designers or architects ever involve ourselves in the process? Because how do we, I think that is what I've been struggling with in the entire process of doing this, is where do I insert myself? How much can I take a decision for? I mean, people have aspirations, and I think we spoke about this also. We spoke about the JRC Palladio housing in Bangalore, and why it was named firstly after Palladio, or had pediments and was based after the Palladian villa, and things like that. So I mean, people are always going to aspire. I mean, you can shift the market to make something more aspirational. Suddenly you have servant quarters. So I mean, that's aspirational now. If you don't have it, it means that, oh, your house is not so luxurious, or things like that. So I mean, it can always switch, it can always change, you can always nudge it. How? I don't know.
I think these need for these luxurious amenities goes back to like a little bit of like a social issue, I think, because the fact that, and to a huge extent, people like having this not because they want to use these amenities, but because, so I think the basic human tendency is for us to want to feel superior to the other, want to make that distinction that we can own this and you cannot. And because we want to do that, and because, I mean, I know it's not related to spaces in general, but I think it's why people want these amenities is because of that social issue, and that because of, so I think that's the reason. I don't think it's not, I don't think we're making progress. And so I don't think it's a basic tendency to make progress, but yeah, I think it's an issue actually. I think it's a problem that we crave for us to create that barrier between us and like the other people.
No, yeah, definitely. I would say that the whole idea of owning it, or saying that I live in a housing which has a swimming pool, it has a gym, as a status symbol, I think is more important than actually using the gym, or actually using the swimming pool. Sometimes I wonder whether this can be addressed in slightly different ways. What, for example, what if I have a virtual swimming pool, so that on all the advertisements and all the Instagram posts, as well as if people actually come to your house, they will see a swimming pool, but it's not real, because all you want is to show that you have a swimming pool, right? Or sometimes I wonder the other way around. What if we keep a subscription fee for not using an amenity after having it? So if you have a gym or a swimming pool in your society, and if you don't use it, you have to pay $1,000 a month. If you use it regularly, it's free for you. But anyways, I'm just sort of throwing up ideas about. Uh, on one hand, we cannot deny the fact that the house, like Lakshita was saying, is also something that you want to show as a possession, that I own this and I'm capable of owning this, that I'm rich enough to own this, and in that sense it's a display of your abilities, and that partly takes the form of these common amenities, and what are the common amenities you have. But actually a lot of these common amenities actually are not efficient at the scale of housing. Since in the chat people are talking, like Siddharth is talking about the gym, for example. uh, for a gym to work, or for any facility to work, say a swimming pool or a gym, or a clubhouse or a theater, if I actually look at the catchment area of population I need for any facility to work well, uh, since Siddharth is talking of the gym, for example, if I want a good gym, if I want to run a good gym today, I need to have a specific set of equipments, and equipments keep changing because new products come in the market. If I want to continuously update the products in my gym, I need enough footfall, and I need continuous monetary infusion to be able to sustain that. Not only that, typically a gym needs a catchment area of 5,000, 10,000 people at least, because that's the proportion of people who use a gym. A swimming pool requires 30,000 people to work efficiently. So for each amenity, I think there is a certain appropriate scale. Uh, to me, a good example is New York. If I look at Central Park, at least for Manhattan, now Central Park is about 4 kilometers long by 1.5 kilometers wide. If I were to parcel Central Park into small gardens and put it with each block in New York, I'll probably get a 5 meter by 5 meter garden with each block in New York. So now you have two options. Either everyone gets a 5 meter by 5 meter garden, or Manhattan as a whole gets 4 kilometers by 1 kilometers of a park. They are not the same thing, although in terms of area they are the same thing. So I think this question of amenities is not being asked from the perspective of what is the scale at which these amenities can operate or can meaningfully operate. And I think that creates a problem. So I think there are a few more questions or comments in the chat box. Apurva is saying that that with 100 flats in a 3-block complex, after the lockdown, people have started to extensively use the gym, clubhouse, and the park because they can't go elsewhere. And Kiran is talking about Georges Perec's Things, a Story of 60s, saying that it could be an additional read to the wonderful discussion here, where he talks about people buying things to put inside a thing called a house. Yeah, I think, yes, Kiran, I know you very well. Maybe you're introducing for the rest of the people. But yeah, I think this whole idea of things or possessions or ownership as opposed to actual act of inhabitation is a important distinction, I think, which a couple of times we have discussed in the studio, that there is a entirely different system at work when you're talking about owning something and showing off that you own something. That's the joy of owning something. And I think it happens with all products, no? So you buy a new phone and there is a joy that you own a new phone. I think half the time we are not using 70% of the facilities that the phone has to offer, or the bandwidth or the RAM that the phone has to offer. But there's still this, when we buy a phone, we are looking at, on one hand, how much we can afford. So that aspirational thing does come into picture. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, Chanda is asking, can regionalizing these amenities instead of treating them as universal ideas help? Of course, I think it will help a lot. I think right now, at least if I talk about India, there was a phase when a movie theater was the ubiquitous sort of common amenity that was being offered with many housing projects. The gym and the swimming pool have become additions to that. So irrespective of where you are in India, a gym, a swimming pool, and a small movie theater seem to be common amenities that. But it might be interesting to talk of what what this regionalization of amenities would mean. But at the yes, no, go ahead, Asha.
I was just wondering that, like how Chanda was talking about regional amenities and all, even if you do, I don't know, include something in that sense, at the end of the day, the aspiration is not what the architect is portraying, but it is what has been and what will be, in some sense, by a much larger media than this fraternity, I think. So in that sense, even if you have a regional sort of amenity, isn't the fact that people are always going to want that swimming pool and that gym and I don't know, whatever else that was in like Lakshita's video maybe, but something that is, the idea is to want something universal. That is the aspiration itself. So I don't know that how do you sort of change that, or how do you start changing the idea of the aspiration itself?
So, yeah, Kashi, can I say?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. A year and a half ago, I mean, I believe most of you know that there's a thing called CREDAI in India, where it's a community of developers, builders, and people who are real estate policymakers, and even the part of rules and norms, I mean, the making authorities who will, I mean, it's a platform where people come together and discuss that. And here, GUI-head is also another body which behaves locally in the same fashion. Around 1.5 or 2 years ago, there was one kind of common meeting where developers who are practicing more than 15-20 years in a city, not just in Ahmedabad, but from different cities, they've come together, and also with various officials from respective Surat, Ahmedabad, Baroda, AM Corporation, Noida, all those people. And one of the things that was discussed is kind of this shallowness that we sense in terms of amenities and the way they manipulate the audience. Now, there were there was one very strong argument that has come from the developer's side, is that, and this was said by, this was supported by two developers who were wise and who still believe in humanity sort of thing, and then who would like to practice ethics and moral values, etc., and they had some belief and future for the world. So some sort of, what they said is, the reason why they need to fake it up is because if Ahmedabad if in Ahmedabad somebody wants to go to a good swimming pool, how many good swimming pools are there? If somebody wants to have a good library, how many good library Ahmedabad has built? And likewise, Baroda, Surat, etc., etc. So the reason why large amount of manipulation is happening is not because developer wants to do it intentionally. There is a large population who is copying that, but the occurrence of this, why it happened, was that since there was a void, it is very easy to manipulate. And because the city, none of the corporation or none of the urban authority are taking strong agenda, or they are not having any of this as part of their vision, where they will enhance the livability of a city, or maybe the joy of a city, or whatever recreational value of a city, or experience part of the city, or functional part of the city, in a legible way, where by providing such things, it can elevate at a city level, so that those load does not fall onto the project. Right now, what is happening is that load is in a way absorbed by the private developers, and in a way they are, because it's not there, I can make it shabby and still sell it, because there are no, if we all read, if we just go one generation before, let's say if I see my father and Kashi, if you see that father of, if we see that generation, they were very happy to go to common parks that are there in the city. I'm sure there are still some amount who will go for a morning walk and all, but how many of us have stepped into a corporation garden and spent an hour? And why we don't do it? There's a specific reason why we don't relate with that, which we will do in our city, or maybe in a society where we live in, because the lawn is well cut, it's trimmed, the landscape seems finished. Range of it, maybe it is well lit, etc., etc. But there is enough poor things available, or there is even less of a things which are available outside, which eventually becomes a point of somebody else's manipulation and a business, which we all are facing. And that's why person who is building a 200 square feet of a gym for 2,000 people, he is not a fool. He knows that I'm just going to stick it up. He knows that I'm not going to, he knows that nobody's going to use it. And that's why he's building small. So, it's like these facts everyone is aware of very much, absolutely. And that's why the way in which there are times things are tweaked is in that relationship. Else, as Kashi said, when the city, what is the role between a city and a housing, or how they can actually merge so that it functions, it works with each other. Otherwise, Within a gate, if you have everything available, I'm sure nobody will move out. And two, how many things you can put in within a gated community? How many experiences you can put in within a gated? You can't do at all. I mean, it has a limit. Point is, none of the authority is making this, and this can only be changed if the policymakers actually think of it, that there is something called experience, there is something called aspiration, there is something called living standard. Or, I mean, mostly people take the word lifestyle in a very casual way. I mean, that's what all these developers, sell it off, like that, lifestyle apartments and this and that, and all those stuff, which may not have a literal meaning to it, but that's why people hang in, and they relate to. So because everybody wants to expand, everybody wants to have better than what they have, belong to something which is better than where they are. And then eventually it becomes a simple cycle of, business in a weird way. So, and then as architects, because we read stuff, because we read certain things, because we value a lot of things, and we have this, we become a person of that, we become that child of Little Prince, where we say, everybody talks about how big when the elders, I don't remember exactly, but that book in the Little Prince, it says, I don't know what happened to the elders, because when they meet, they say how big their houses are, but nobody says whether that house has a butterfly or not. Nobody says whether this thing is happening, and I feel they are stupid. So that's the conversation of a child, which in a way we are doing as adults. We are saying, how come somebody is not prioritizing the quality of light? How come somebody is not prioritizing this, that, and that should be there in the housing? But that's what the elders are doing. I mean, and that's the resultant which we all of us are experiencing in whatever way. So I mean, aspirations, like it can be framed. I really like, if you see, maybe in a small projects it's not as possible, but when you have a scale of a certain, there is some percentage of a room where, as a designer, if we actually want to intervene and make a difference of, it's possible, and over a period of time, like maybe after 15 years, when all the houses will have a water meter, no project will have a swimming pool. I mean, at some point of time, I mean, when we know that now the fitness is the only way to stay or to stay alive, maybe all the projects will have a good, decent gym which works with instructors, with all these standards which one should adhere to, rather than this labeled pieces which we have. So, but it will come if there's a demand. It is entirely based on the demand. And that's what the cycle is. Like, to begin with, if we say in 1970 or 1980s, none of the projects used to have lifts. And the projects that had lifts, they used to very, proudly say, we have a lift in our project. I mean, and then if you go today, the people who stays on the ground floor, they will have a chaos, like this person say, "Main to lift use karta hai nahi, maintenance kyun karu?" So even second floor person will say, I used to have, I usually climb stairs, nobody does that. So eventually there are a lot of things that happens, but lift in that way is an amenity. I still know people who's like of previous generation, when they used to choose houses, and when they had to choose one with lift versus without lift. When somebody used to choose a lift, when there's a conversation happens or a gossip happens, it's like the family is lazy to climb a stair. It's like those people are not, you can't climb 4 floors, that's rubbish. But that was the evaluation parameters. I mean, that quality was different. So the resultant was coming in a certain way, and obviously with higher floors, I mean, you can't expect that everything should happen in the same way, but that's what it is. The city is LAT in the city is working in a big way, and it can't be fixed till it takes whatever rule that it has to. And right now what is happening is, even the officials, when the conversation was happening, the official was saying आप लोग कर रहे हो तो हम लोग क्यों करें. So अभी like टेबल टेनिस का मैच चल रहा है, कौन जीतेगा we don't know, but that's what, like it's yours, it's mine, nobody knows whose it is. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what.
No, yeah. No, I think that's why I think it is the problem I see with the privatization of amenities is that then it is accessible only to a part of the population. The whole idea of a city is that the public of the city is available to everyone, and there is no class distinction when it comes to that. Truly public spaces or public infrastructure is something that you don't have to pay to use, like a public park or even a public library. And like I think picking from what Chitra is saying in the chat, I think what is happening, like you're rightly saying, is that a lot of times these are just sold as advertisement. I mean, I'm quite intrigued by this idea of a Venezia with gondolas filled with tankers. It's like taking it, I think, a bit too far. But I think, Chitra, like you're rightly saying, no one then thinks about how they will sustain over a period of time. And in a lot of projects, these amenities fall into disuse very soon.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
they
no,
either
no,
fall
please
into
go ahead.
disuse. But you see, when you have so many units, even for maintenance, what's asked sometimes to many of the people will be pittance. So they don't realize that they're paying for it. But usually, and I've heard developers saying that it just costs one house's cost that they're putting a pool, but it gets a huge mileage. But what's happening is in Bangalore, most of the layouts had a swimming pool. Okay, and it would be the common pool of this of that area, and it was quite common to put that. And in fact, even now, our own area, which has probably about 40,000 people, they've made a swimming pool. And what's important is that we have to push for this need. This is a very important need. Many Indians don't know how to swim. In fact, I think whole generation doesn't know, and it wasn't so. And so how do we realize that this is a need and this has to come as a physical need? It's like you should know how to, it's almost like walking, you should know swimming. It's as important as that, but we don't. And then when we come to lift, we still start, like I think Dhaval was saying, it's not exactly all the time it's aspirational. Sometimes we have to put these because we are not having a whole lot of population accessing places. They can't even access on a ramp. Forget ramps are not there. And these don't take too much money. So how do we now talk to the students that look at this as needs, but how do we design that these become public? What is the negotiation? So in Bangalore, in layout, so that's different from apartment blocks. The roads which are made, they become public roads. The owners and others hate it, but they become part of the city. So they can't really make it gated. They fight for it being gated for a long time, but eventually it goes to the city. And this is agreed, and that's how the layout design is passed. And Bangalore is the only city still in India which has meters, Dhaval. And it's been having meters for past 60 years for every house. The water supply is metered. And now they have in the apartments, each apartment will have metered water supply. They're looking at also metering the wastewater so that they know how much you're consuming, also, besides what's coming from the authorities. Because it costs you to treat the wastewater. It's not just what you consume. There is a cost of treating the wastewater. These are issues which we have to think of, and we have to really think of, even if you make pool, what kind of pool you make, where it could also become a space for biodiversity rather than a concrete and tiled area, which is biodiversity averse. So these are lots of right now conversations happening, and I think we can't, as architects, really influence. I think this whole conversation should happen from the school levels. So, what does one aspire to? And I like that example of butterfly, Dhaval, you gave.
Yeah. No, and actually, like I think Ujjwala is pointing out in the chat, in many cases, the maintenance costs start rising in these luxurious societies. And I was quite amazed to hear some of the amounts that people are paying as monthly maintenance costs. So, and I was just comparing it with the housing that I live in, which is a Gujarat Housing Board non-gated housing community. And because it's non-gated, even street lights are part of what the city provides. And I am paying 150 rupees a month as maintenance fees, which is only for 2 tube lights in the staircase mid landing, and the motor which pumps water from the ground to the top. And some of my students are paying 10,000 rupees a month as uh, maintenance, just to maintain these super expensive swimming pools and gyms and elaborate security systems. I think it's just madness the way it is going.
Yeah, so there is also need for where does one need what, and then the whole question comes to: is tall really ideal for such developments, for housing especially? And Ashok Lal puts it very well, because as you, and also Korea has put it in his new landscape, as you make it taller, you're also constructing with materials and energy to maintain much higher. It just doesn't make sense, and we still keep doing it. Here in Bangalore, sometimes they laugh that we are paying a rent to live in our own house. The maintenance cost is so high.
Yeah.
Luxurious it becomes, it's like you're paying rent to live in your own house, which you don't have to do.
Mm.
So it's very interesting. I couldn't hear the rest of it. Is this finished, the students' presentation?
Yeah, unfortunately it is, but we'll be putting it up on YouTube, so I could share the link. And
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, no, I think it's good that maybe, in fact, I was discussing with Dhaval maybe that sometime maybe all the L3 studios can also come together, maybe one day, just to have a open discussion, you know, because I think as a group of studios, we are all dealing with some sort of urban issues, but tackling them from different lenses. It might be good to have a common forum where we are just chatting and all students are also sharing their experiences.
Sure. I think we should do. This is the first time I'm teaching, so I'm just getting into
Right.
each other's whatever presentations I'm listening. I've never done that before.
Right. No, it's great. It's great to keep having these discussions. Yeah. Okay.
But it is, see, it's just that what works at times is that, at least what I see in some projects, that at times I'm not saying it has translated, but if you sell your term I mean, if you do what you want to, I mean, eventually what you would like to achieve, but if you can convert that into something which is also exciting for them to sell or for them to locate that market or register that market, it actually becomes a scenario where they will invest heavily. Like if we say that if you want to sell your township as having so this is one idea that was sold to one developer in a very, like, what if I call that my township has 10,000 trees? I mean, for me, having many trees, not shrubs, not lawns, not this, something which is robust, something which stays, and it works as a skeleton of landscape, not the skin or the muscle, but the bone. So like if I'm looking at something, I don't care whether this thing grows well or whether there's a fragrance or not. Let's say I don't care, but if I want something of that sort, if I want to make an impact of that sort, and if I convert that into an idea which marketing people will like, which the builder themselves will see some relevance, which also becomes a differentiating factor from other people, because that's what everybody's trying to do. Somebody will say, so let's say if you hear people who are sitting into marketing this thing, I mean, the real estate and the way site offices and the marketing offices work, they'll say, "Sahib, Ela project karta, aapko swimming pool motor this our gym is having. Have you heard of this brand? That is the equipment we are using. Ela ma to badu hamna ek baras ma badu pati jasa." So it's like, how do I stretch? Eventually everybody wants to stretch because all they want to do is capture the market, capture the attention of people, fulfill things which other people are not doing, and in what way I can be unique, in what way I can be a proposition which becomes a differentiating factor from others. So, and can those right now it's just that maybe not many people have paid attention to, maybe not government is as much interested into whatever, but like that's why those things have fall little off. But the moment more and more people will start doing that, maybe the moment we have few more pandemics, we all will realize that immunity is important. We all will realize that the fresh air is important. And yes, we can live without driving as much, even though I don't need to drive. So, which many people are doing. So maybe we realize that yes, work from home also works. So before that, we don't really sit and think that it can be possible. I'm not saying all the results are, but it is just that we're so into that process of seeing things from the same perspective. We never change. We never see the other facet of it. And so till now, it was for all of us, it was impossible to imagine that a set studio will be conducted online. I mean, if that, I'm sure we would be going to the protest ki nahi hona chahiye, but when you get into that, maybe there's a good side also. So yeah, it's a lot of things which are at play, as students have also said. Like there's no one thing, a lot of factors, but one of the way, there's no fixed way, but yeah, the way, maybe how do we shape the aspiration, or how that shaping of aspiration can also be highly influencing factor for the market feasibility. And can I convert that? Can I convert my noble idea into something which is also earning profit in some sense? Not literal profit just for developers, but maybe profit to the society, profit to the environment, profit to like. And if the more we push it, maybe then we see. And I'm sure, I think now in some coming time we will be seeing hoardings where they say in our premise the air is cleaner by X percentage than the adjoining society. It is going to come, and it has already started. Like people have started conversing how to do that, and that's why the way outskirts projects. Sorry.
No, I was saying I just saw a hoarding just sometime back of work from home apartments.
Yes.
So one developer is already selling WFH apartments. So, but I think what you're saying is an important aspect that uh, uh, at least if we look at good developers uh, who are doing a business, they are not run of the mill, or they are not fly by the night developers. Uh, they are looking for something new. They are looking for something unique, and I think that, to me, that is the Achilles heel of the developer. That they are anyways looking for something new. They don't want the same old thing, and that is probably an entry point for us to change the game of what how should we uh, uh, how should we project this housing, what how do we sell this project, and I know it's a bit tricky, but that is where possibly maybe for the sake of marketing it is done in a particular way, but uh, uh, as professionals, as architects, we know that we are, instead of just pandering to what or something that is in some ways useless, like a swimming pool, we end up doing something which is more productive, like say this 10,000 trees example. I'm sure if you put it up as a housing project which is a forest of sorts, then that will also become a selling point. So
Yeah,
of
it
course
is.
there
So
will be a certain basic, yeah.
yeah,
So
so
some basic minimum amenities will have to be kept, but other than that, it is about how we also deal with this question of what makes,
the answer is going to
yeah.
happen in several projects. It's like the one project cannot solve it. So like in this project, you just do this. So let's say if my basement is 10,000 square feet, the role, I mean, at that moment, the role becomes: is it possible that I can reduce 600, 700,000 square feet and then have that as part of something where the water actually can percolate, or where a certain kind of landscape can exist, which I'm sure is existing on the old housing projects, where that there's a charm of that place where if I mean, how come only like if we see the neem tree at a canteen, it grows so well, and you don't see that around. I mean, you don't see as often because of many other reasons, because the quality of soil, because of the water level, there's that. So, but if I want to, if I want the next generation to experience that, I need to do something accordingly, so that it may happen, it may not happen, but at least there's a possibility of somebody, doing that. And maybe that way it grows in some way. Else it's like it becomes a problem which is unsolvable in a long, in a short run. It is something which you really have to maybe do it in bits and pieces. And at times
Yeah.
it's what works is, uh, you say, okay, what do you want? Marketing person will say, I need this, or the owner will say, I need this, and then say, okay, let's, if I give it to you, can you give me this? Are you ready to pay for this, or can you invest into this? And maybe that is where maybe something is possible. Else, yeah, it's a struggle where there are, because everybody has their ego, everybody has their belief system, everybody has their formula in place, and yeah, if you want to
So
change it,
so
it is,
I think you're touching upon one other dimension which becomes very difficult in academics, where I think, and all most practitioners do this, that they know that they can't do everything in one project, and that there may be peculiar or specific conditions of a certain project, because of maybe it is finances or site conditions, because of which you cannot implement all the ideas that you have. But you know that as an architect, your search and your goal is much bigger than individual projects, and therefore we make peace with the thought that uh, in every project I will keep trying the best, but I'll be okay with whatever I can achieve. Whereas the way every studio is an independent sort of exercise, and therefore in every studio you want to achieve everything, and there is, in our education, there is no scope for talking about how to deal with dejection, how to deal with unrealized potential in a project, which as practitioners one is forced to deal with. You know, in every project there is some unrealized sort of dream and one has to make peace with it. And I think this is something that personally I am also interested in, that how does architectural education deal with this aspect of design, that you cannot do everything in every project. But yet, that doesn't mean that you should lose hope. Your larger goal or vision should stay strong, so that you know that in every project I will keep pushing the boundaries, and little by little, maybe over a period of time, that gets achieved, which also I think happens with practices, young practices, that the first time you do a project for a developer, obviously you cannot do everything, but maybe in the second project, third project, maybe not even that, maybe in the 10th project, by the 10th project, maybe you would have made some headway into it. So how do we engage with this long-term struggle of the architect, and how we deal with projects is something I think we don't talk about enough.
Yeah. Also the role which we all need to in a way consider is that there's a lot more exposure than ever before, that since which is happening since last 15-20 years, which never existed earlier. So even though it existed, now we know that it is possible to realize. Like if you run a survey, which I try to do informally, to like ask how many people or how many actually would like to have X versus Y. Like if we say swimming pool or this or that, like if we say that, would you like to have it? Would you really like to have it? Do you have, even though whether it's there in your premise or not? But then what comes up is because maybe it is seen in some other media, because they have seen, because the swimming pool was part of lot of movies, lot of other media. The way it's like that is a meaning of luxury, and then we take it in a very literal way, and then that's what everybody wants to easily be done with. So they will fetch that and put it likewise. So it's a lot of reading of where we label the luxury, and if we can do it in a meaningful way, I think then then the equation will start changing. I mean, I need to living in a forest. Like if you go to Africa, or maybe place where there's this one resort which only caters to 5 cottages, and there you might pay 1 lakh rupee per night, and that stay there, because to stay in a forest or to but it is, and that area is still not accessible to most of the people. How do we bring those areas, if we really wish to, in whatever way possible, as also Chitra said, like it can be part of biodiversity, which if I say that, okay, I'm designing instead of children play area, which we all see done in a very, most of them are done in a horrible way. What if I say, like, if your children will come to know about 10 other insects, 50 other butterflies, and this and that, which also solves in other way, and maybe then they will read it differently, then they will pay for it.
Yeah.
So it is just about rephrasing and touching upon the weaknesses of the market in whatever way possible.
Yeah, I guess we have lost Siddharth again. Well, of course, this discussion can be endless, but and I think a lot of questions have been thrown up as usual, and like we are doing in the studio, of course, the challenge for us
this time we lost Kashi only, huh?
Yeah, so I was saying that the challenge for us in the studio is to ask the question, how do we translate it when we are designing, or what do we do? Because I think we are very clear about one thing, that research on housing is one part, and then applying it in design is equally important. Of course, we might not be able to solve everything. We might not end up designing a housing which can address all the sort of myriad issues that have been brought up today. But for sure, whatever you think is more critical or more important for you, I think in the next phase, hopefully we'll look at how to go about designing it. Yeah. So thank you everyone for attending and commenting and listening. I think it was a good session. We'll be putting this up on YouTube in case someone wants to refer to it again. Yeah. Uh, okay then. Yeah. Bye everyone.